Welcome to Anita's Excerpts from the Experts, 7-minute learning sessions with researchers and practitioners in the field of eating disorders, and individuals who share their experiences and perspectives. I'm your host, Sarah Bowie-Keaton. This week, our guest is Dr. Lydecker. She's a child psychologist specializing in treatments for teens with eating disorders and higher weight, and has been appointed a Fellow of the Academy of Eating Disorders for this work. Dr. Lydecker is an assistant professor in psychiatry at Yale, where she directs the Teen Power program, which currently has treatment studies for teens with bulimia and higher weight, teens with binge eating, and teens who have been bullied or cyberbullied because of their weight. Today, Dr. Lydecker will be speaking about her study that is focused on testing treatments for teens with bulimia and nervosa by comparing cognitive behavioral therapy with mindfulness treatment. Dr. Lydecker, welcome to the program. Thanks for being here with us. Can you please tell us a little bit about this study?
I'm happy to tell you about this study. So we are doing a treatment study to test a new treatment for bulimia nervosa against a generic treatment for bulimia. So what we know about eating disorders in general is that bulimia is typically very responsive to cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's the gold standard in many ways of how we would treat bulimia in both children and adults. But what we don't know, because we haven't really seen any data on it, is what happens when the child or the adult has a higher weight or a larger body. And so the purpose of our study is to take cognitive behavioral therapy and to specifically treat adolescents and young adults with bulimia nervosa and a higher weight to see if cognitive behavioral therapy works well for them. So one thing we did to personalize and adapt the treatment in just a little way was to add some self-compassion skills specifically to address weight bias and weight stigma that society is very prevalent at expressing towards adolescents and all people with larger bodies. And so we have our regular cognitive behavioral therapy, but with self-compassion worked throughout it. And we're comparing it to mindfulness. So mindfulness is, it's a great treatment. It's a great way of coping. And yet it's not specific to any one disorder. It's more of a broad skill or a broad approach. And so we want to see if adolescents and young adults with bulimia will do well with mindfulness. So that's our comparison group in the study. We actually think it's going to work pretty well. And if it does, that's good news because we can much more easily spread that to other clinicians so they can treat individuals with bulimia more readily, in addition to the standard highly specialized cognitive behavioral therapy.
So you said in addition, do you think that if it is successful, it could replace cognitive behavioral therapy? I'm thinking about those individuals that just don't do well with CBT because there is that component of a lot of work outside of therapeutic sessions with the worksheets and the homework. And sometimes that can be a barrier, especially for adolescents, I think.
For sure. No one likes to do homework. No one likes to practice in between sessions. With mindfulness, there is some element of practicing the skills. So we take the approach where mindfulness is a lifelong practice. It's not just something that you would do for 40 minutes a week for 4 months and then be done with it. It's something that we're hoping becomes a pattern, and that does require practice. So there is some in between material, but I think you're right that cognitive behavioral therapy just isn't a good fit for everyone. But as opposed to thinking about that, the burden or the in-between sessions, what we're actually starting to see very early on in the study is that our teens really like mindfulness. So they see it as a way to maybe get treated for bulimia without talking about eating and weight. And especially when when teens are first identified as having bulimia, might not have thought that they would be someone to have an eating disorder, maybe because they're in a larger body or for another reason. It can be a really big jump to start cognitive behavioral therapy where you're talking about eating and body image and a lot of very sensitive topics early on. So I think rather than replacing cognitive behavioral therapy, what we're looking at is having certain teens more likely to respond to one or to the other. So it's always good to have treatment options, both for clinicians and for teens themselves.
So we know that you're including self-compassion skills with your cognitive behavioral therapy to specifically address the weight stigma in your study. Can you tell us about the weight stigma piece?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when I've done other studies in the past, all of my studies build on one another. We've had teens with binge eating and teens with other traumas, and they've come in almost universally describing being teased, bullied, or criticized because of weight. And so we're seeing this as something that becomes clinically relevant for everyone. So when I was thinking about, well, how do we address this internalized weight bias amongst our teens with bulimia nervosa and a larger body? The thing that kept coming to mind was self-compassion, because teens who are teased or bullied or criticized for their weight, whether it's by peers or family or society, they need another option for how to talk to themselves and how to think about their bodies, themselves, their identity, other than what this message has been that is more stigmatizing and more of the weight bias theme.
So it sounds like this is something that, like you said, this can become a lifelong tool to use for probably a wide range of things that people struggle with. So what are the implications of this study for individuals and families affected by bulimia nervosa?
Well, this is a pilot study. It's very early on. So we're comparing these two treatments we're hoping will both help teens and young adults with bulimia. At the most basic level, we're hoping to confirm that cognitive behavioral therapy is effective for teens with larger bodies as well as bulimia, not just for teens with an average weight or underweight. So that is one thing we're hoping to show that teens can get better. But we're also looking to see if there are alternative treatments that maybe could be through a self-help or guided self-help format, or in primary care, or by clinicians who aren't necessarily eating disorder clinicians. And so that's where the mindfulness piece comes in. I do hope as well that even though we're treating bulimia in this study, that we'll start to see some patterns emerge, so we can help teens who might have just body image concerns or just binge eating or just purging, but not the full picture bulimia. We can help them with some of these tools as well, but that's way down the line.
It's baby steps for these research studies. Like you said, they keep building on one another. Well, thank you so much for your work and for the impact that it does have on individuals and families. And I know that usually it takes a good amount of time, over a decade often, when these studies come into practice. So it's very cool that we have this program that is sharing what's going on at the research level and get the information out there much sooner. Well, good luck with your study, and thanks so much for being a part of this.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
NEDA's mission is to support individuals and families affected by eating disorders and serve as a catalyst for prevention, cures, and access to quality care. NEDA offers programs and services designed to help you find the help and support you need. Whether you have been personally affected by an eating disorder or care about someone who has, recovery is possible, and we're here to support you.